going to talk about sugar, obviously. Now, I wanted to start with the reason why we love sugar so much. There's actually a survival reason for it, and it's because when we had to look for our food and just eat whatever was available, sweet foods denoted ripe and safe, and bitter foods denoted possibly poison. So the sweet foods we would eat more of because they were safe, but also in order for our species to survive, we have to be able to eat, nurture others, and reproduce. So those activities are all connected to a pleasure center in our brain. Eating and sex and taking care of others are naturally enjoyable, supposed to be naturally enjoyable. So the sugar has the sweet foods cause us to experience pleasure so that we will repeat the behavior. So that's why, that primitive wiring is why when we eat a sugary or sweet food, it's hard to stop, because we're still wired the same way, even though we don't still need, even though we can tell what foods are good and bad for us now, we're still wired to eat more of the sweet foods. And back when in prehistoric times, it was okay to eat all that sugary sweet food at once, because for one thing, you didn't know when you were going to have access to it again. And second, people were always moving. They were constantly running, so they were burning it off as quickly as they ate it. So the first big change was when we no longer had to run around for our food, but we could stay in one place and either grow it or raise it. So that was the first change. Then the next change was in the industrial production of food, which enabled us to make, mass-produced flour and sugar, which led to processed food. And now our current state is in America, we have all the food available to us. We don't really have to do anything. We have a sedentary lifestyle, and food readily available, high calorie dense food readily available. So the pendulum has gone the entire opposite direction. So in general, in our country, we no longer have diseases from famine, malnutrition, unsanitary conditions. Our disease states now a lot of it stems from our lifestyle. And sugar plays a major role in a lot of these lifestyle diseases. So a few things that happen when we eat sugar. First of all, what's supposed to happen when we eat any food is the sugar content is in the bloodstream, the nutrients are in the bloodstream, and then they go out of the bloodstream through various transport systems and get to the organs and other places in the body that need the nutrients. Now, when you have an overabundance of sugar in the bloodstream, after a while, your insulin receptors wear out. They can't take the sugar out of the bloodstream anymore, so it just stays in the bloodstream, and that's what leads to diabetes. Also, too much sugar in the bloodstream can inflame and damage the blood vessels, and that will lead to the formation of the plaques that build up in our vessels, and that's what causes the cholesterol formation, which can lead to blockages, heart disease, hardening of the arteries, all that bad stuff. Now, when we eat sugar, we're going to get more into this in a little bit, but your body has to do a lot of work, obviously, to break down and use the sugar, and it doesn't get any benefit. Like if you're eating, a piece of candy, let's say, like hard candy or something, that's just like a peep, a marshmallow peep, it's basically pure sugar. Your body's not getting any beneficial nutrients along with that. So it has to use, it has to use nutrients involved in cellular functions to break down the sugar, doesn't get any benefit. It actually loses the ability to create more energy for itself because it already used some of those vital nutrients. And that's, I mean, it's kind of an oversimplification, but that's one reason why when we eat too much sugar, we're always tired, because our body's just kind of like getting depleted. Now, sugars that occur naturally, like if you eat an orange or a pear or something, you're getting, it is sugar, it's naturally occurring sugar, but you're also getting the fiber, the vitamins, whatever happens to be in that piece of fruit. And fiber slows down the sugar going into the bloodstream, so that's good. And your body's also getting some of those nutrients replenished. So for our purposes, when we talk about sugar in this presentation, we're really talking about refined sugar. I mean, there is a danger to eating too much fruit, which we'll go into a little bit later, but we're talking more about refined processed sugar. So again, like we said before, kicking the sugar habit, at least even if you don't cut it all the way out, reducing your intake of refined sugar is going to help you avoid obesity, diabetes, those lifestyle diseases, heart disease, tooth decay. We know that from when we were kids, that it's bad for our teeth. There are studies that link a high intake of sugar to some depression and anxiety. And also, sugar can be bad for your skin just because it wears your cells out so quickly. It's actually linked to premature aging and wrinkles. And sugar has an antibiotic effect, meaning that it kills microorganisms, and the microorganisms are the bacteria that live in your gut are microorganisms. And you know, we want a healthy balance of the bacteria in our gut so that we can digest and absorb the food that we eat. And if that balance is out of whack, you know, your food is not going to be metabolized properly, which can lead to obesity, and just, you know, so many, the root of so many chronic health conditions is in the digestive system. Because you really, I know we talked about that at our last presentation about your immune system, and we really want to keep that healthy, because once that's out of whack, it's like everything can start to go downhill. So just another, you know, not undesirable effect of sugar. And I just wanted to go through this. There are a lot of animal studies that have been done that have shown sugar, the animals have demonstrated the components of addiction when they're exposed to sugar water in these studies. And sugar does produce the dopamine effect in your brain, like we talked about before. But right now, it hasn't really been proven that it's an addiction. A lot of scientists think the effects on the brain are more like caffeine, and we know that's kind of addictive, but it's not like a really serious drug like cocaine or heroin. So for our purposes, we're going to call it an undesirable habit, not an addiction, because when we're talking about addictions, that's a whole different ballgame. So we're going to talk about it as getting away from an undesirable habit when we talk about quitting sugar. Now, as far as how much is okay, these are upper limits. They're not saying you should eat 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. The American Heart Association is saying that for men, 9 teaspoons max, women 6 teaspoons max. And then US dietary guidelines, no more than 10% of calories from sugar. So for a woman eating 1,200 calories, you know, they're roughly equivalent. You know, you can go by the 6 teaspoon rule, 25 gram rule, if you're looking at a safe level of sugar. But again, keep in mind that, you know, less than that is okay as well. Okay, this chart, the point I wanted to make here is that sugar is hiding in a lot of foods that we might not suspect. And I mean, there are some things we kind of know, like a Starbucks Frappuccino, we kind of expect that to be high in sugar. Maybe not, whoops, sorry, maybe not as high as, it might be higher than you think it is, but other foods that you might not expect it to be in, like Campbell's condensed tomato soup, it's kind of a comfort food. It actually has 8 grams of added sugar. Spaghetti sauce, and these are all over the board. Like, I tried to pick just like a representative slice of these different categories of food, like not the very lowest, not the very highest, just about average, I guess, for these categories of food. And some of them on the labels, they'll specify when the sugar is an added sugar, and some will just give you a total. So you really don't know, if is this something that was like naturally occurring in the food or the fruit, or was it added? Like the 2 canned fruits, I put those on there just as comparison. Like the one that's in juice, it has 13 grams. So we can pretty much assume that's naturally occurring. But when they put it in the heavy syrup, it jumps up to 21 grams. So that, we can assume that's 8 grams added. And really, the point of this is just to make sure you're aware of and reading labels, because some of those are, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but companies are very good at marketing, like the sports drinks, Gatorade, vitamin water. They're extremely high in sugar. And I know they have their sugar-free varieties out now. Those also have their drawbacks, and we'll talk about that in next week's presentation. We'll talk about artificial sweeteners. So this is really just, read your labels. And this slide shows there are many different names for added sugar, and this shows 56 names that can be on ingredient lists, but basically are pure sugar, pure processed sugar. Some of these are more processed than others. I think last time we talked about molasses, about blackstrap molasses being a very good source of iron. So, with that one, you are getting some benefit, but a lot of these are just pure sugar, concentrated, added to your food. And the way ingredient lists work is the first ingredient listed means that it has the highest proportion in that food. And then they just go on down the line to, the last one is the lowest proportion in the food. So manufacturers will use different names for sugar, so that, like, pure sugar is not the first ingredient in the list. And I don't know if that's by design or if it's because these ingredients actually come from different sources labeled as different foods. But again, it's something to be aware of. And this is just an example of a healthy, a food we would think of as healthy, Kashi Go Crunch. And it is, it has protein, it has fiber, but you want to be aware, here are all the different sugar components. We have brown rice syrup, cane sugar, and honey. And then if you look over here at the ingredient list, we have 13 grams of total sugar, including 11 grams added. So just jumping back here for a second. So let's say we have a bowl of kashi in the morning. That's 13 grams of sugar with a cup of milk. Now, dairy milk has 12 grams of sugar in it. If you drink either whole milk or skim milk, they both have around 12 grams of sugar per serving. So all that together, you've already got your 25 grams of sugar for the day. And that doesn't include any in your coffee. So just be aware. And I circled chicory root fiber just because I thought it was interesting. This is actually inulin, which is a fiber additive to many foods. And I know a lot of people myself included, cannot digest inulin. So we could have a whole talk on different names for foods and ingredient lists, but that's another thing good to be aware of. Okay, so we're going to switch gears for a second and just talk about when you decide to limit your sugar intake or give it up altogether. As with anything, you know, any habit you want to change, the mental part is probably the hardest part, deciding you're going to do it and then putting a plan into action. And we'll talk about these more in the subsequent sessions, but just wanted to speak for a minute about the readiness ruler. There's two rulers. There's one that shows how important a change is to you, scale of 1 to 10, and then one that shows how confident you are that you can actually make that change, again, the scale of 1 to 10. And this is something you have to kind of be honest with yourself about, because a lot of things are important, you know, like maybe important to you, but how confident you are that you can actually do them. You might be still back at a 2. And, you know, you need to get yourself ready so that you can increase your confidence. And then when you're pretty high on both rulers, that's when you want to actually put your plan into action. And second, acknowledge your feelings. I mean, a lot of times it's not just food, it's that food is, you know, has a sentimental meaning. It's, you know, maybe a dessert that your grandmother always made or something like that. And, you know, that's when you want to try to have a talk with yourself and realize, well, okay, you know, if this is going to hurt someone's feelings that I don't eat this, maybe that's what you leave your sugar allotment for, or, you know, you just realize that, you have more feelings around certain foods than just, you know, nutritional value. Think about the barriers to your success and how you'll deal with them, what your motivation is, healthy distractions. And by that, I just mean, you know, a lot of times when you're thinking about, oh, that piece of cake's going to be so good, if you just train yourself to think about something else that is not food related, that is also pleasurable, like going for a walk, you know, reading a book, something like that, it can help you train yourself to get away from those like really focused cravings. Define your strategy, and everybody's different. Some people can just like pick a day and say, okay, after this, no more sugar. Some people like to do it one meal at a time. Like, okay, I'm going to cut down at breakfast. Once I get breakfast in shape, then I'm going to work on lunch. Then I'm going to work on dinner, that kind of thing. And then your goal, you know, pick a realistic, achievable goal, work toward that. And then you have to realize as you're doing this that it's not like something you're going to give up sugar for 15 days and then go back. It's a lifestyle change. You want to incorporate healthier habits in the place of an undesirable habit. And again, getting your environment ready is key. And I realize this is a difficult time to do this because everybody's at home, and especially if you have family members, kids, it's hard to control the food in your house. You want to try as much as possible to not have that tempting food around, and instead have alternatives, crunchy fruits and vegetables. There are certain, I know it's kind of cliche, but rice cakes, there are certain brands that are actually very crunchy, very satisfying. Make sure the people you live with know what you're going to do, and try to get their support and their buy-in. It would be great if everybody in the household could do it at the same time, but again, that's not always realistic. And then if it helps you, visual reminders are really good, like, you know, little sticky note reminders to yourself, you know, motivational, like you can do it. Pictures of a fit person, maybe, you know, an outfit you really want, something like that can help you stay on track. And there are quitting sugar apps. I honestly have not found one I really liked. I've kind of played around with a couple of them, but I did find Fujicate is a new food app, or maybe it's not new, but I just found it. And I really like it because it has a lot of good information. It's a meal and exercise tracker, but it also has the feature where you can just scan the barcode of a food, and it'll automatically give you like the Fujicate grade for that food, and it'll tell you what its, you know, good points are, what its bad points are. And I really like that. These seem to have a really large database. So if you haven't already, you might want to download Fujicate and just play around with it a little bit and see what you think. These are just a few helpful tips on things that might, you know, help you support your body as you think about this change. One thing that might work for you is if you make rules for yourself as far as eating, like, you know, I'm going to allow myself 2 squares of dark chocolate a day, or I'm going to, you know, everything I eat has to be on a plate, you know, those kinds of things that work when you're establishing new habits. One story I'll tell you, it's kind of, well, it's not gross, but I live alone, and I had gotten into the bad habit of drinking milk out of the carton. And I told myself, you know, first, I don't like that habit. And second, you don't really realize that you're, you know, drinking extra calories. So I said, okay, new rule, I'm only going to drink milk if it's in a glass. And, you know, so that kind of worked for me right away. And actually, I was surprised at how much extra milk I was drinking, because now I don't have to buy it as often. So little things like that. I mean, you know yourself, you know what will work for you and what won't. As always, you want to drink a lot of water so that you feel full. And if you are eating more vegetables and things like that, you're going to have an increase in fiber. So water will help with that. You want to make sure you're getting plenty of sleep, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be like on this carb craving thing, because you need the energy. So you're just naturally going to reach for the calorie dense carb food, like the comfort food. Because we're tired and we want the energy. Fat and protein at every meal are going to help with your cravings and keep you from having those severe blood sugar dips when you think you need a sugary food to get your blood sugar back up. They just help keep things on an even keel. Find a diversion besides eating. We talked about that before. Replace a sugar eating behavior with something that doesn't involve eating. And that's just retraining your mind, you know, to come up with healthier alternatives. And then finally, just a few points I wanted to make. And this goes back to the slide with the sugar content of the foods. I don't know if you noticed, but one of the foods on there was the bottled smoothie. It's the Naked Green, Super Green Machine or something like that. It had 53 grams of sugar in it. So, you know, you need to be careful. That's why you have to read labels, because it sounds really healthy, Naked Green Smoothie. And if you look at their website, it looks really healthy, but it's got 53 grams of sugar in it. And that, you want to avoid the smoothie and the juice trap. Juicing isn't as big as it used to be, I don't think, but that was, you know, for a while it was touted as the way to get your greens by juicing a whole bunch of fruit with your greens. But I don't like it, because you're kind of taking out all the fiber of the fruits and the vegetables, and you know, you're losing out on that benefit. And also, a lot of smoothie and juice recipes that I've seen have a lot of fruit, a little bit of vegetables, and, you know, like 3 apples and 2 pears. And when you put that into liquid form, it's easy to consume it. But, you know, if you think about it, I wouldn't sit down and eat 3 apples and 2 pears just to get a handful of spinach. So look for balanced smoothie recipes. I have nothing against smoothies, but look for balanced recipes that, you know, don't overdo it on the fruit, have some sort of fat in it, like an almond butter or whole milk. Protein powder is good as well. And then your vegetables. And then you want to look out for anything that says low fat or light, because in most cases, when manufacturers take out the fat so that they can label something as low fat, they do increase the sugar so that it still tastes good. And I think the last point I wanted to make on here was to be careful, like if you go to like a health food store or you know, like a store like David's or Roots or even Trader Joe's to some point, Whole Foods. I mean, they're all great stores, but you still have to read your labels there because you can fall into the trap of just buying like expensive junk food. You know, it again, the marketers, they're good at making it look really appealing, really healthy, but you still have to read those labels. You still want to look for all those added sugars, look for the sugar grams. Keep that 25 grams in your head. You know, even if you're not interested in kicking the sugar habit, at least try to stay in the 25 gram of added sugar. And that'll help you when you're reading your labels because, you know, it goes by serving size. And if something's like, you know, really crazy, then you just want to avoid buying that. So that's all I have for today. And I'll take questions if anyone has them. These are just showing what we're going to be talking about. Like next week, we're going to talk about artificial sweeteners and go into more specifics about how to take action to reduce or eliminate the sugar in your diet. And then we'll talk about the glycemic index and how to avoid some pitfalls. And then finally, on the fourth week, we'll talk about maintaining your progress and how to, you know, stay the course once we go back to our normal lives. So thank you. And if anyone has any questions, we'd be glad to take them now.
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Good.
Thank you, Kara. That was really good. I think some of these things it's just good to have the reminders. And then also, you know, right now, the one thing that all of us can really do personally to help ourselves is to keep our immunity healthy. And I know that everybody's drinking, not everybody, but we hear alcohol sales are up 250%. You go to the grocery store, the entire ice cream aisle is completely wiped out. And we're not trying to deprive anyone, but, you know, if some people say, what's the number one thing that I can do right now to get healthy and stay healthy? This is so great. We know that people with diabetes, people that are battling obesity, people with heart conditions, they're the ones that are at the highest risk right now.
Right.
And to know that processed sugars, you know, to be reminded of that alone, it helps train the rational side of our brain, right? Now the emotional side, that's the one that really needs the motivation. So I want to remind you guys, we only have a limited amount of willpower. That's the one thing I do know as a habit coach. And so you do have to pick and choose your battles, right? And so this is about taking good care of yourself throughout the day, making sure that you're not letting your mind go into overdrive, because every single decision you have to make, it steals a little bit of your willpower. And so getting good sleep, taking good care of yourself, taking those walks and allowing your mind to calm down is, if you want to kick the sugar habit, these things are going to be critical, because no matter how much you know the fact, that refrigerator is going to draw you towards it, right? And so I think that first thing about, you know, just getting it out of the house, not buying it. And especially now that our grocery trips are restricted. That being said, here's the most common question I get with that. What about my husband? What about my kids? I can't, you know, I'm not living in a vacuum. How do you handle that question? Because people aren't willing to, you know, completely dispose of them and not bring them in the house because they don't want to, you know, not give it to their kids, not give it to their husbands.
You're asking me how to handle it?
Well, yeah, of course, that's something you deal with, don't you? Living alone with no children and no husband. You must hear that all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and honestly, I think that's the hardest part. I think, that's when you have to, I mean, if you get the support of your family, that's wonderful. That's easy. And that's why you have to, make it, you can't do it secretly. Um, you have to be, your family has to either be on board and do it with you or not try to sabotage you.
What about you talked a little bit about substituting non-food rewards, but I know in a lot of instances that can help. That can help deter the craving. But if I had to choose, if let's say I'm having a sugar craving, it's something that I'm already facing regularly, would you say good, better, best? Have a piece of fruit, or what about starchy carbs? So I can easily have a starchy carb, and that will actually satisfy my sugar addiction. I think we talked about sugar a lot, and a lot of people think that you're promoting a low carb diet because that accidentally gets lost in the translation. So talk to us a little bit about our carbohydrate intake and what would be a healthier alternative if there is one.
Well, I think if you're having a real sugar craving, like you're between meals, you're starting to get a little hungry, and again, your mind's going to go to sugar. A healthy snack would be something like maybe peanut butter on an apple. I would rather than just have a piece of fruit, I would say add a little fat to it, or maybe even like a slice of apple and a stick of string cheese or something like that.
To make it more satisfying.
Well, it's more satisfying, and it's going to make you feel full longer too. Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to be, hungry again. Like if you eat an apple, that's good, but you're still going to be hungry again if you were truly hungry, if that's what brought on the sugar craving. The apple's only going to last for so long. If you add a little bit of nut butter or some cheese with it, that's going to sustain you longer.
Got it.
Yeah. If you're just having a sugar craving because you're having a sugar craving, you're not really hungry, then that's when your diversion might come in handy. Like going for a walk, getting yourself out of the house, getting away from whatever you're currently doing. Because sometimes just a change of scenery can really help with cravings. If you really, you can't get rid of it, dark chocolate is not the absolute worst thing you can eat because it does actually have fiber and some other.
Only if it's really dark chocolate.
Yeah, like
70%, 90%. Anything under 70 is all sugar.
Yeah, I say 72% or more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even that, it does come in individual squares. So that's another one of those rules, 1 square a day. But again, it can be.
I don't like all these rules, Kara.
You don't like rules? They work for some people, not everybody.
Susan's asking, is the 25 grams added sugar only? Yes. She's using cereal and milk, for example. The sugar content from the milk would not count towards your daily 25. No, that's naturally occurring sugar in the milk. They're not adding it to that. Fruit, we're not counting that as added sugar. And also monk fruit, we're going to get to next week. Susan, we're going to talk about artificial sweeteners. It is an artificial sweetener. We're not going to, but we'll get, that's a whole other topic that can get a little controversial. So we're going to save that for the next one. But we're really talking about refined sugars that are added. So for cereal, if you're eating shredded wheat, then this isn't the type of sugar we're talking about. If you're eating frosted shredded wheat, then we're definitely talking about the sugar in there. Right, Kara?
Right. Right.
And I hope you're not eating frosted shredded wheat.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I just want to ask a question. Kara, the whole 25 grams, this is only added sugar that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. But is there a limit on, I mean, even if you're not going to like stay home and eat, 23 apples in a day either. So is there some sort of a guideline as far as regular naturally occurring sugar?
Well, that would be like under like carbohydrates. That would be kind of considered a complex carb under, and that would be different depending on your calorie intake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Can I ask one other question since I'm there?
Yeah.
When a person's trying to either reduce or completely eliminate, sugar, do you have sort of a guideline or a time frame from your experience how long it kind of takes before you're not craving any longer?
It's different for everybody because it depends on how much you were eating in the first place. But I would say on average 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just an idea. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've heard the same. If it's an actual addiction, so if it's a physical addiction, it takes about 10 days to 2 weeks for that actual physical craving to end. But if it's been a lifelong habit, we've heard that it takes 21 days to change a habit. That is the farthest thing from the truth. Once you've done something every day for a year, then you can actually say you've broken a bad habit. So for everyone, it's a little bit different. You have to think of it this way. Something that's a habit is something that happens so automatically, it takes very little effort to do or accomplish, right? So if it takes very little effort for you to have a piece of candy or go in and just start mindlessly eating ice cream, it's definitely still a habit at that point. Once it gets to the point where you have to really think, someone offers it to you and you're like, do I want, when you actually have to take effort in order to accept it, that's how you know you've broken the habit. Does that make sense? And I've been doing habit formation and habit breaking with clients for years now. And it actually, once you're at that 6-month point, then you're really in the clear. You're not going to be susceptible to the daily emotional toll that this takes. And so what I can offer you is just don't be so hard on yourself. And if I've used the word bad habit, I apologize for that. I want to think about focusing on doing what's healthy for us and focusing on treating ourselves well. So a lot of times when we frame any sort of restriction as though we're withholding something from ourselves, it's not going to be successful. When we think about waking up in the morning, how am I going to take good care of myself today? How am I going to love myself today? And when you think about, think about your parents, think about the people that you know that have battled with diabetes and heart conditions because they couldn't get under control. And think about, I need to do a better job of loving myself because I've seen the people I love suffer from these things. Then when the most effective craving control that I've ever seen and implemented is called an interception question. So yeah, we're loving ourselves, we're trying to treat ourselves healthy, but there's that critical point where you're like reaching for whatever it is. And if you can have at least enough willpower to ask yourself the interception question, most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time, you'll be in the clear. And so when we are seeking the reward that comes from the pleasure of food, Kara talked about this early on in the way that our brains are wired for sugar. We're seeking pleasure. And it's not just the taste. Whenever it comes to food, actually any sort of habit forming thing, we are seeking a greater pleasure that's associated with the fulfillment of consuming that. So I'll give you an example. Food represents comfort for a lot of us. It represents soothing our feelings. Sometimes it represents celebrating. It's a part of the celebration. It could be a positive thing. When we can identify what is the emotional pleasure that I'm unknowingly deriving or seeking, not even deriving, seeking by eating this, am I looking for comfort? Am I lonely? Am I bored? All sorts of things like that. And then, so that's the first one. What is the reward I'm seeking? And the most powerful part about this interception question is this. You then ask yourself, the last time I ate this, I did that. Did it give me the reward I was seeking? Did I feel less lonely? Did I feel comforted? Did I feel good about myself? Did I feel soothed? Whatever that is, we're all different. We're all seeking these pleasure rewards for something else. But what ends up happening with the way that our brains are wired is those first few times that you tasted sugar and associated it with comfort, and it gave you comfort, yeah, you got it. But what happens is with any habit, the more you seek the reward, the more you seek the pleasure, the less you get it from the thing. So what we're doing is we're seeking something that's ultimately now not delivering that pleasure reward anymore. Alcohol is an example of that, right? The more you drink frequently, the less you actually get the benefit that you were seeking. Maybe relax your mind, maybe to catch a buzz. You become desensitized to the pleasure, but you still seek it. And that habit is still formed because you're seeking but not getting. So those two interception questions can be the most powerful thing, because what they do is they bring your rational mind and your emotional mind on the same playing field for 1 second. My rational mind knows that I'm seeking this for something. What am I trying to get? Because it's not just the taste. If it was just the taste, you'd be like, okay, that lasts like a second. I can skip that. But you're seeking something else. Either you're bored, you're lonely, you're sad, you're trying to make yourself happy, you're trying to feel comfort. Are you tired? Identify what it is you're seeking and then ask yourself, well, the last time I ate a cupcake because I was bored, did it satisfy my boredom? And then it usually will give most people the willpower to back away from that. The problem is you have to at least have that interception question ready. Anyone have any other questions about habits and how to break the habit before we end? Yeah? All right, well, thank you all so much. It was great having you guys here. I do have the recording of this that I'll post, or if you want it. But next week, we're gonna get into artificial sweeteners. So are these the same as sugar? Are they just as bad? And what's the next step in breaking the addiction? All right, thanks everybody. You guys have a great afternoon, and I'll see you in the inner circle soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye, guys.